Next up, we have Kelvin Chu of the Eden Strategy Institute. He's a partner there, and his panel will discuss the future of services. Please welcome them to the stage. Thank you very much.
Very good afternoon to all of you. Today we're going to discuss the future of services. I think all of us are very familiar with how Industry 4.0 has really transformed the way that many things are being done in factories. But I think what many of us are also curious about is what Services 4.0 could look like. Singapore has taken the lead in this in terms of putting out this concept of services which are more frictionless, more empathetic, more end-to-end, more anticipatory. So today we're going to figure out what does this really mean for all of us in practice. Let's start with maybe a brief introduction. Maybe let us know a little bit about yourself and what you are doing to frame the way that services are being conducted altogether. Shall we go with Jane first?
Sure. Hi. So over at the Infocomm Media Development Authority, our role is really to act as a chief digital officer for many of the industry clusters and sectors. And so our mission is really to drive and accelerate digital transformation in every sector and every business. And we do that together with partnerships, and in particular for small and medium enterprises as well, which 80% of them do not have an IT department. We provide a lot of quality assurance to actually help them evaluate and decide on what digital options are best suited for them. Yeah. So, and maybe just to share one thing, we launched a technology roadmap last year named Services 4.0, really about what is the future of services that we see. And one of the interesting findings we saw was that in 75% of customers globally on now actually still prefer interaction with a human. So we think one of the key issues is really about how do humans and machines interact together in the best possible way to deliver the best possible experience for customers. Yeah. Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Jane. Duleesha?
Sure. Duleesha Kulasooriya. I'm in the group called Center for the Edge out of Deloitte. I'm out of San Francisco. And for lack of a better term, we are like the futurists for Deloitte. And we focus on business models. Like we recognize that technology is what's disrupting and technology is what's enabling the future. But we think about, well, how do you create value and capture value in that context? So I'm not a services expert, but it is a future that we have to deal with. And my focus of the 4 words you mentioned would be the empathetic piece on that.
My name is Binru. I run OneConnect, which is the fintech subsidiary of the China Ping An Group. And we bring financial institutions in Southeast Asia solutions that is used in China. So we bring what's best in China for Southeast Asia. Today, a lot of financial institutions are moving from product-driven kind of strategy to service strategy. So you will see that these solutions are very well wrapped around the lifestyle services of the customers in general.
New lifestyles. Yeah. Bruce?
Hi, I'm Bruce Davie, the CTO for APJ at VMware. And so our company is probably the largest software company that most people haven't heard of. Generally what we do is we help our customers build, manage, and consume clouds and cloud services. And so in many respects, what we're helping people do is deliver their services to their customers by providing a set of services underneath that let them be more agile and be able to bring new capabilities to market faster.
Thank you. So Duleesha, you mentioned about new business models, and for many of us who are in the services sector, you know, there's ongoing industry consolidation. There's always the war for talent. There's an advent of new business models. There's technologies bring about altogether new opportunities. What do you, anyone can answer, of course. What do you see to be some of the major global and regional or local trends affecting our services sector?
You go first.
Go for it. The services sector, I don't know in general. I mean, we are seeing, I guess, there are different layers that you have in the 2, 3, 4 kind of services. There's more and more people having access to the internet, then to mobile phones, and now there's a whole underlaying of the emerging technologies. And it's not monolithic. You don't see it all in one place, but you are seeing the layering a lot more. I think it's a different context in Silicon Valley. We're definitely going beyond that to the human aspect of things as well. There's a big discussion about, as we get more and more services, what is it doing to us as humanity? But I think it's a little different in Asia still.
So just to chip in on that, I think we see sort of three key shifts or trends. I think the first is what a lot of people have talked about in terms of AI. So I just call it the ABC. So the A stands for artificial intelligence, and not so much about the technology, but I think one of the best ways to think about AI is that it's going to dramatically lower the cost of prediction. And then you can think about, if you lower the cost of prediction, which is very expensive today for businesses, what would that do to your business model? So some people have speculated that today you shop and you buy and you order things, but what if the cost of prediction is so low that the company could just deliver things to you, and then you just pick from that? So you turn the whole business model around. So then B is, to me, is about the B2B e-commerce. I think we see that as a big shift. I think B2C is fairly obvious in terms of where the transformation has been, but we see a lot of growth in B2B. There are some studies that say that it's about 2.5 times the size of B2C, and I think we're starting to see a lot of companies look internally and say, how do I actually digitalize, and how do I act in this ecosystem of partners to get B2B services? And I think the last one for C is cloud-native architecture, and I think that's where VMware, for instance, would be great to speak on that as well, because we see that as fundamental to services in terms of the agility and the scalability of new services, because it's important for end-user companies to be able to access new IT services quickly, within a matter of hours or days, and not the traditional weeks or months. Yeah. So those are the three key trends that we see. Yeah,
ABC. For all of us to remember.
Yeah.
Can I jump to Bruce, if it's okay?
Sure.
Bruce, I think your company is doing everything, virtualizing almost everything from cloud servers to security services. How do you see virtualization, just because we're talking about cloud, transforming the way that service delivery is being done?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, virtualization is the technology that underpins clouds, and these days we spend a lot more time talking about cloud more broadly rather than just virtualization. But I think that the thing that's really transformative is that now you can get the capabilities that you need to develop the thing that's actually differentiating for your business without wasting any time sort of going out and building the infrastructure. So 7 years ago, I was working at a startup, and we had almost no infrastructure, and indeed, very few of our own internal systems, because we could either, rent infrastructure by the minute from, any number of cloud providers, or we could get SaaS services for things like payroll and, HR, all the things that historically you would have done in-house. So this sort of rise of cloud services means you don't waste time doing things that are fundamentally not differentiating for your business. And so a lot of what we do is we try to help our customers differentiate themselves by making all that infrastructure stuff just easy for them and something that they don't have to waste time on.
There's also a trend, I think we talk about new business models. We were chatting, Bing Ru, outside about how the consumption of services is fundamentally changing to the point made earlier as well. Are you able to share with us a bit more about that?
Well, in Ping An, definitely we noticed the change, of course, in consumers demanding more and more out of their lifestyle, unrelated to financial services. So if you just backtrack maybe about 6-7 years ago, Ping An had 80 million customers, out of which, banking customers, out of which 50 million are taking other services. So there are taking other services of Ping An out of, so it's a subset. But today is the other way around. We have 500 internet customers that takes one or more out of our services that's non-banking related. And the subset then is our banking customers. Wow. So you can see that even the financial institution has driven their business in a totally different way by engaging the customers in non-banking related activities so as to get more insights about what your customer needs and wants. Yeah, so in a typical example would be our Good Doctor platform in China. So we started with every policy that we sell as an insurance company in China, that they get access to an online virtual consultation platform. And then today, we've gotten so much volume on that platform, we realized that mothers at home with little kids, that it's inconvenient to go see a doctor, or elderlies at home, it's inconvenient to travel, would do that online consultation. So the volume is now bigger than our insurance policy, and the volume is driving the other way around. So I think fundamentally it's changing the way that business, at the starting point, is changing. Yeah.
That one works on telemedicine. We talked about cloud. This morning we heard about a tech tsunami, and I was wondering, for all of you guys, what do you see to be the technologies that we should, as service leaders, what should we bet on? Is it AI? Is it blockchain? Is it bots? What are your views?
I'll start by saying don't bet on blockchain. I mean, by all means, speculate or gamble, but I think I've spent a fair bit of time looking at the blockchain space, actually, and first of all, the whole cryptocurrency thing is sort of the Wild West, but there is this really interesting set of things happening around using blockchain for business-to-business applications, and I think there actually there's real potential there. So I'm not going to say blockchain is not going to do something. I just think we don't know yet what it is. So of the technologies you mentioned, I would kind of rank it as the least mature, but I also say, pretty confident we're going to see something in the next 5 years where blockchain has a real impact, but I think it's more likely to be somewhere in the enterprise sort of consortium space rather than it being in the world of currencies.
Actually, Bruce, it's a time horizon thing. Like blockchain will fundamentally disrupt more things. AI is going to enable a lot more. Blockchain is going to fundamentally disrupt more things. But you're right, it's not in the next year or two.
Yeah.
I don't think you actually can say there's a particular technology or, because it's also about the combinations of technologies that you bring together. I mean, a lot of robotics now isn't just purely about robotics. You need to have the AI part as well. I share Bruce's thing about blockchain. I think you need to find what is a specific use case. I think we've looked through quite a number. We've decided, at least for us in Singapore, that one of the key ones will be in trade, in terms of digitalization and sharing of trade documents, just because the networks are so wide and so dispersed. And I know Ping An is also doing something on blockchain when it comes to trade. But a lot of the other issues about blockchain, I think you have to look at the actual use case. But going back to the point, it's really about what are the combinations of technology can bring together that actually, if you go back to Services 4.0, it is really about what is that different level of experience. And if you stay sort of focused on that, to say what can you personalize, what can you actually anticipate, and what could you even, I love the statement because one bank told me, what if we can stop 1 million problems before they even occur? So that is the kind of experience. And then the technologies coming together to really enable that.
You guys are doing a lot of fascinating work, micro expressions to tell people's emotions and things like that. What technologies are you most excited about?
Well, fundamentally, because we have a lot of solutions in China, when I first started Singapore, I decided to take what is latest and greatest and that will ramp up in Southeast Asia in the next few years. And somehow, by luck, I think, you realize that overall it clusters down to a set of blockchain solutions and a set of AI solutions. And if you had been to the FinTech Festival last year, you realize that a blockchain startup is a blockchain startup, which is somewhat separate from the AI solutions. In the near future, I believe the two is going to really integrate. Right, the blockchain solutions that we have built today are very focused on trade finance, regulatory. It's all about shared data, right? And AI is all about getting more intelligent. I believe in the future we will get to a point of what I call shared intelligence. Yeah. So the two has the dependency of the two technology are the same. It's a dependency on computing power and data. So, and these two is increasing by the day, right? So for sure, the two technology will find synergy with each other. We have recently implemented a small case in a trade finance platform. So a trade finance platform allows banks to communicate with each other with some limited data. And we've never been able to put in any AI solutions in there. But over time, as we pilot, we realized that these trade platforms all has customs in there. And so gradually we're implementing AI solutions for customs. if you cross the, all of you must be at the airport all the time. There's somebody that's manually looking at your X-rays when you put in your bags, right? And so that can be automated by AI so that, you know, nobody gets eyes tired and then another person takes over, and that totally can be done by AI. So we started to put that solution into the trade finance platform and trying to see whether we can find a way for the two technology to be communicating with each other in one way or the other. So I think in the next big thing will be a combination of these two.
Yeah. I just wanted to pick up on that, actually. I think this idea of synergy between the technologies is really important. That, I mean, you kind of touched on not only the intersection between AI and blockchain, but also cloud, for example, gives us the ability to get massive amounts of compute to run your machine learning algorithms, and all these things depend on data, and the more data you get, the better the algorithms get. So I have a bit of a history with AI because I almost did my PhD in AI back in the 80s, and thankfully I dodged that bullet. Just as AI went into a steep decline, I went off into networking as it was taking off, so that was good luck. But the AI was massively overhyped back in the 80s, kind of was a bit of a disappointment, and it's so much better now 30 years later because other things have moved on. So, you know, we can put massive compute power behind it compared to what we had 30 years ago, and we can feed massive amounts of data into it. You know, thanks to everybody who uploaded cat photos to train all of those algorithms for image recognition. And, you know, all of these things, even take IoT as another kind of buzzworthy technology. What does IoT do? It generates reams of data from these, you know, interconnected devices. So I really like the way all the technologies play off each other to give us, you know, forward progress with all of them.
I thought just to add one, because we did talk about 5G earlier this morning as well. I mean, I think that's also really like a fundamental enabler. I think we're just right now at the very beginning of thinking about what are some of these exciting enterprise use cases or consumer applications. But if you really cast your mind all the way back to when we had 3G or the beginning of 4G, I don't think anyone would imagine the world that we are in today, where there's so much data or information being consumed, and how videos are now upturning the entire marketing model. So I think there's just a lot of potential. It's not easy to say 3 to 5 years' time, what do we would say, just because technology is changing so quickly.
And to add on Bruce's point on cloud, because I came from Microsoft before I joined OneConnect, at that time it was a tough time to tell people that cloud is more secure than your own on-premise data center. But when I started the AI journey, I realized that then the dots are getting connected, because AI algorithm never does well in on-premise, always do well in cloud, simply because you need to tweak the algorithm, you need to improve the algorithm all the time. So when it's something that you bought smart and you decide to install in your on-premise server room, 6 months later it's not going to be that smart, right? So I think I'm seeing a lot of synergy with cloud, with AI and blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of the combinations. I'm also curious about how just as much as the technologies are converging and finding synergies, what about how the new sort of service delivery models, the new operating models, and as we talked about, the new business models will come in to transform the nature of services? Have there been interesting case studies of how you've seen, I mean, outside of what you mentioned earlier as well, new ways that services can be reinvented altogether, given the popularization of some of these technologies?
I mean, I guess the thing that struck me thinking about changing business models is we've actually seen business models changing now for 20 or 30 years thanks to the sort of first generation of e-commerce. If you think about sort of what happened to travel agents, I think that was back in the 90s when we started getting Expedia and Travelocity, and all of a sudden, to connect a person who wanted a plane ticket to an airline, you didn't need a travel agent anymore. So it was this disintermediation of an entire industry that now, it's not quite out of existence, but there's not a lot of, old school travel agents left. And I think that trend has just continued and gotten more and more dramatic as these other technologies have come along, because all we had back in the 90s was kind of like, web browsers and fairly simple applications, whereas now, you take all the other technologies we touched on and you can, do things like, I guess, Uber or Grab's kind of a canonical example of, you can match somebody who wants a ride with somebody who's got a car without having really any sort of intermediary in that process, and that's completely disrupted a whole other industry.
It's probably led to interesting opportunities for maybe niche players or people with different kind of assets to become service providers as well.
Yes.
Have there been other interesting examples you
I
love?
totally think that AI is so focused on improving the customer's experience that in fact it has pampered the end consumer so much that the expectations may be even unreasonable at times, I would think. So if you look at so many examples, even KYC, which is just facial recognition to get onboarded, people don't have to go to a bank to open up an account. In China, we also do video, which is micro-expression analysis to actually analyze or do a video on a loan, potential borrower on a loan. So a lot of things need not require you to travel. Even Good Doctor platform doesn't require you to travel. So it's for the convenience of the individual. A typical call center service. Today we use voice print to recognize the customer, so you don't have to answer questions like what is your mother's maiden name, what is your telephone pass pin that nobody remembers, etc., etc. So I think it has set the consumer's expectations so high that any other services in future is going to need to require to meet that high expectation in order to drive adoption.
And I thought just actually even in government, right? I think the private sector is really charging ahead, but I think in government we also try to. So in Singapore we have this thing called the moments of life. So rather than you go and apply for services, what if we could anticipate based on certain milestones or information that we have, especially when people have a child or baby, what are the milestones that they would typically go through, and how can we just be there when you need it and actually proactively offer it? Because not everybody has the time to go search out for all these services as well.
Any other examples? I love the one on anticipatory design, using data to be able to forecast and provide a higher level of service altogether. Have you all seen this happening to a greater degree in other countries? Where do you see this happening in Singapore? What needs to happen? Does every player need to tap into big amounts of data in order to have this kind of anticipatory type implication? How should we all get started?
I think that the fact that people can imagine what is possible with AI have already, unfortunately, raised the expectations of the individual ahead of what the technology can do to a certain extent. So it's nice being visionary, but Singapore needs to hold a regional agenda so that we can actually test and pilot things. Otherwise, it's forever in a sandbox, forever in an incubation. So the financial sector is moving faster than the rest of the sectors, and a lot of questions are all these things that we have in discussion, are they applicable to health tech? Are they applicable to reg tech? And I was just sharing with Kevin offline that the fundamental technology that's driving all these other verticals is the same. It's natural language processing, it's all the voice print technology, facial recognition, emotion analysis. All these are, the fundamental tech is the same. So we believe that it will take off in a big way, but meeting the expectations of the consumer, which is already hyped out by imagination today, that's going to create a gap, because you potentially will be disappointed to see, or you don't have the correct mindset to learn together with the technology, to progress together with the technology. There is a journey to get to perfection, right? So that potentially can be a pitfall to address.
Let's talk about this journey. I think many of us who are in this room are almost a select, elite, almost fairly elite bunch of people who are technology savvy, well educated. What I'm worried about a bit is that the long tail of service providers could be people who are, even in Singapore's example, TCM providers, mom and pop shop owners, hairdressing salon owners, and just getting on the bandwagon to be thinking about AI may seem like an impossible climb. What advice would you think would be helpful for people to just get started? How should they transform, think about their business, and also even think about employing new skills within their small organizations?
So I think it's a fundamental change management issue. There's this quite funny comic where someone asks us, who wants change, right? Customers, everybody's like, yes, me, I want change. Okay, so who wants to change? Then everybody's like, oh, okay, everybody's kind of quiet. I think the key issue, especially for a lot of small and medium enterprises, is really that I think of it as a journey to health. You don't expect to be able, if you've never been exercising, you don't expect to run a marathon tomorrow. But the idea is that there are a lot of supports available. I think nowadays we see actually a lot of small business actually just starting on the cloud, which is actually great because then they can take HR as a service, finance as a service, and the costs are low, so it's much easier for them to scale. I mean, you contrast that to 10 years ago, you had to buy your own servers and all that, it's much harder. So just to share on what, at least for Singapore, we run the SMEs Go Digital program. So under each sector, we have an industry digital plan that we co-create together with the businesses, the trade associations, and chambers. And it's meant to be simple. I think you really have to make technology simple and not scary. So you just have stage 1, 2, or 3. And then if this is the stage that your business is at, these are the kinds of solutions we pre-approve for you. There's funding that's available. So it just makes it easier for people to take the first step. But I think fundamentally it does come down to the issue of leadership in the company because I think the leader has to sort of have that vision as to where things are going and how he wants to change the business. And then think about how the jobs actually will change for the workers. And then actually communicate that because it's fundamentally about, I think Davie made a good point. It's the people. So your customers could be leading on one side, but your workforce has to also want to change at the same time. Otherwise, technology is actually ready, but what will slow it down if you don't have a people strategy is really that your people are not ready to do that. Yeah.
I think there's a real opportunity too for services companies to help small businesses adopt the new technology. So one really interesting example is there's a dairy company that we've worked with in India where they're using pretty advanced technology around IoT and cloud to improve the productivity of dairy cows. And there are small farmers working with this bigger dairy getting help to adopt the technology. So basically little family businesses are getting more out of their cows, making more money based on adopting technology. And it's not like, I don't think there's a huge amount of sophistication amongst the average sort of dairy farmer that they are getting enough help to leverage the technology to make the business that they run more productive. And I think you could see that happening off a lot of different businesses where a small business could work with somebody who's more technology savvy to make incremental improvement to the way they deliver their services.
Some kind of a big brother, small brother.
Yeah.
Any other?
Well, I think to Jane's point, it's easier than ever before for a small, medium enterprise to get on this because for companies like VMware, they made it quite seamless. They don't actually have to understand the technology. They just have to know to press a few buttons. So the training required is actually much less than before.
I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, I recall maybe about 5-6 years ago, you try to convince an SME to be adopting some kind of a technology. They will only look at their bottom line 5 years ago. But just simply 5 years now, every SME knows that they want to adopt some kind of a technology, and the cost is getting so low, it's easy to try something.
We talked about leadership, we talked about different kinds of support systems. I'm continually humbled by how, the very last, we call them uncle and auntie, senior workers and so on. Not necessarily senior, but just maybe just more reticent to technology. I wonder if in your experiences, what have you seen to be successful ways to bring on board the very last member when for them they might be thinking, this is not for me, this is too high tech, my time will come, one day I may be out of a job. How do you encourage, motivate them to just see that it's possible for them? What have been some nice models?
I think if you start with the engagement, it's really important because understand what the pain points are. So just to give an example, we worked with this small logistics company. So they are like second generation. So they actually did a whole bunch of things on actually trying to the traditional way in which they used to manage their fleet of trucks was literally paper and things you stick on a whiteboard. And it was so difficult because orders would be lost. You call someone and they will get frustrated, and then the workers would get really stressed, right? And then they would spend hours at night just trying to rectify all the mistakes and all the human errors. So I think what the IT solution provider did with them was really to figure out, sell it to people from what is the pain point. And actually today, if you walk into the office, all that paper is gone. There's just a big LCD screen. It's beautiful. I mean, I met one of the workers. He's like 65 years old, and he enjoys the system. Because he gets to, first he doesn't get screamed at by angry customers. Second, he gets to go back home earlier. And you just sell it to people in terms of the human benefits that they can get as well. Yeah.
It's a great story.
I also think there's a real responsibility for technology companies to make their technology not only easy to use, but also engaging and hopefully even enjoyable to use. And a good example I saw was a company building a language learning app. And they used gamification to make it fun to basically go and study your language every day. But they also did some pretty smart things, like they would release different versions of the app to different end users and see which ones produce the higher level of engagement. And this is one of the things that's really amazing today is, if you're delivering your software as a service, you can release a different version to any number of different groups of people, see which one works best, and then make that the dominant version. And this sort of rapid iteration can really drive better engagement with your customers. So I think that's a huge transformation as the software industry moves from this model where here's a piece of software, thanks for installing it, we'll come back and see you in a few years, to here's a service that we run, and you get to consume it every day, and we'll make it better every day based on the experience that you're having with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm curious when we talk about the workforce. For many of us who are in the audience, there must be lots of questions that we have in our minds about what are some of the new capabilities that we will need to take on to be more relevant. I was wondering if you had any comments about what would be the skills that we can upgrade ourselves constantly. Should everybody learn programming? Where should we spend our time?
So, can I talk about the Centaur chess? The
Centaur.
Yeah. So we were talking this morning, the Centaur, the mythical beast, right, where it's half horse, half human. The reason this comes into place, it was actually 20 years ago, 1997, when Garry Kasparov lost a chess game to Big Blue. That was kind of a seminal moment where a computer did better than a human. What he left and did after that was he started a new brand of chess called Centaur chess, or freestyle chess, where it's a team, a human and a computer, competing with another team of human and computer. And he showed invariably the human-computer combination will beat any computer and will beat any other human. So this is about not replacing humans with computers, but using it to augment the AI piece, right? So in that context, more and more workers are going to have to work with AI behind them. It's not AI is going to replace them, but they'll have the backing of way more knowledge to do that. So if you think, we were talking this morning also about doctors. Doctors should be really afraid, because a computer, AI, could do way more, will remember way more, all the case studies, will know a lot more than a human doctor can. So a good nurse with very good empathetic skills, plus an AI behind them, will be much better than any other doctor. So in that context, creativity, imagination, social emotional skills, those are the skills we should learn with some basics of how you would work with computers.
Yeah, I think there's a nice point there too, which is that from what I've been able to figure out with AI, we're quite a long way from machines that truly think.
Yep.
I think they do a lot of incredible things around things like image recognition, a well-scoped problem. AI is amazing, but the concept of it actually being close to emulating human thought, I don't think we're anywhere close. And I think that it sort of fully matches with your point that the combination of humans who can do incredibly creative things with algorithms that can do well-scoped tasks much better than humans. It's a great combination.
I was going to say that one of our telco companies has this really good tagline, which is a bot for every colleague. So I think just as, I think as human machines, I think when the PC came along and we all learned how to use PCs, or we just grew up knowing how to use a PC instead of writing it out yourself, and it's become second nature, right? So the question is how, and I really hope in the next, few years we'll see a lot more of this, where actually humans actually figure out which parts of the current jobs are so repetitive, manual, and what can you, perhaps use robotic process automation to help you with it, so that actually people can free up time and energy for things that require judgment, creativity, empathy, just things that are, you enjoy doing as well. Yeah.
This morning there was an interesting data scientist on the panel, and he mentioned that the human brain is about 100,000 times more connection points or faster than what the computer can do, right? But of course, as we progress over time, we are creating supercomputers that will reach the capacity of the human brain. But what is unique about the human brain is that it has the ability to evolve and learn, which the machine does not have, right? So we think that as AI evolve, the brain will also evolve to get smarter.
We are possibly at a pivotal time of our human evolution.
Yes, yes. And you asked about whether or not everybody needs to learn coding. So this is a very interesting question. When I first started in NUS many years ago, computer science, nobody wants to do computer science at that time because the jobs are going to India, right? So nobody wants to learn computer science. Today, everybody wants to do computer science, and there's good reason to it. If I can borrow one of the training methodology from JP Morgan, they shared that everybody has a T-zone knowledge graph that you need to acquire. The top of the T is a generalist on technology, and then you are a SME niche in something, expert in something. But the general technology is needed for every role and everyone in the organization.
Okay, we are already running out of time very quickly. It's very fun just chatting with you all. Can I ask if you can maybe give us a bit of a prediction? What's your most outrageous, most far out, wild, sort of moonshot about what do you see to be risk or discontinuities in the services sector that we should all be aware of?
So when you mention risk, I think not so much of a moonshot, but I think of the sort of the serious risk of cyber attacks and security. I think we've touched on security today. I think it's got to be something that we take more seriously. I think that any time we're talking about using technology to try to deliver some service, we've got to be thinking about how we build security into that from the beginning. And again, I think there's a lot of responsibility for technology companies, but anybody who's trying to deliver services using some of this advanced technology has got to be thinking about security.
Yeah, I would agree with Bruce. I think over the next few years, we're going to get some big service disruptions, which make us rethink how we use it, what we use it for, and give new boundaries. Privacy and data is another one that's going to come up in a big way.
I think if we go back to the earlier point about, I think the combinations are really what are important. And I mean, I love the fact that you just talked about, people talk about AI and blockchain because we don't see that coming together yet. And I think if that comes together, actually there's a lot more potential. The other thing, of course, I think actually, like I said before, we're just starting on a 5G journey. I think there's a lot more that we haven't actually anticipated or thought about that could be possible in the next few years.
Yeah. I can't think of anything. I'm a tech person. Basically, I think we try to not think too much about risk, and we try to think a lot about what potentially can happen. Yeah. So I think the only risk would be really maybe not spending sufficient energy on governance, perhaps, so for the government to be able to catch up with the technology, not to over-govern, yet not to under-govern would be important. That would be probably the only risk. Yeah.
Okay. We've covered so much ground, we've made it very difficult to summarize, but some of the key takeaways that are top of mind that we've covered will include things like when we think as service companies about what the future of services might look like, ABC, right? Thinking about AI, thinking about B2B implications, and thinking about really what being cloud native. We covered a little bit about how maybe the interesting potential of different kinds of services and technologies and innovations will be in terms of the combinations across technologies, as well as how these can be supported with interesting business service models. I think when it comes to change, we covered about things like how I think all of us as business leaders, the leadership would be important, coupled with, of course, the support systems, both from a government standpoint, balancing regulations, and also from a design standpoint, for the tech companies themselves also to make it interesting, and certainly from a training and people standpoint. So thanks very much indeed. It's been a real pleasure. Jane, Duleesha, Bingru, and Bruce, thank you so much. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If only we could go on.